She slid the stack of papers across the kitchen table while the hospital wristband was still tight around my wrist. Just sit with that for a second. Not the shock of hearing I had aggressive lymphoma. Not the 40 minutes I'd spent in a cold white office listening to a doctor explain chemotherapy, survival rates, and the shape of the months ahead. The very first thing that hit me when I walked through my front door that night was a yellow legal pad sitting on the granite countertop, Sandra seated across from me in a cream-colored sweater, and that look in her eyes, the look of someone who had rehearsed every word for days, and was only waiting for the right moment to finally say them out loud. I think part of me expected something different when I opened that door. Maybe an embrace. A quiet, "We'll get through this." Or at the very least, a little tenderness. Instead, I got a lawyer's name printed across the top of a document, and the sound of Sandra's fingernails tapping against the countertop, slow and steady, like she was growing impatient waiting for me to catch up. Looking back now, the night that changed my life wasn't dramatic in the way people imagine. There were no screaming matches, no shattered plates, just a silent kitchen in Dearborn, Michigan, on a freezing January night in 2019. The bitter smell of burnt coffee forgotten too long in the pot, frost gathering around the edges of the windows, and the woman who had slept beside me for 22 years calmly asking me to sign divorce papers before the cost of keeping me alive swallowed everything we had. I'm Ray Calloway. I run a small HVAC and mechanical services company out of the southwest Detroit area. I've been doing it since I was 26. I pay my own insurance nearly $2,000 a month for a plan with a deductible high enough to make your eyes water because self-employed guys in the trades don't get the kind of coverage people with corporate jobs take for granted. My oncologist at Beaumont Royal Oak had told me that morning I had aggressive stage 2 lymphoma, that I was going to need chemotherapy, that we had to move quickly. I drove home from that appointment thinking about my daughter Mia. She was 16. She had a debate tournament the following Saturday. She'd been reading ahead in her calculus textbook because the class wasn't moving fast enough for her. I was thinking about how to tell her in a way that scared her less than it scared me. I was not thinking about divorce paperwork. "Sandra," I asked, "you already talked to a lawyer?" She folded her hands together. Not angry. Too calm, actually, in the way that told me the decision had already been made, and this was just the notification. "David," she said. She always called me David, when she was being deliberate about something one round of chemo could absolutely destroy us financially. I sat down slowly. Not because I was weak yet, because something in my legs suddenly felt uncertain in a way that had nothing to do with cancer. 22 years together. And her opening sentence was math. I told her I was going to fight this. I told her I had insurance. She corrected me. "Private insurance," she said. "Your deductible alone is dangerous." She wasn't wrong about the numbers. She was never wrong about the numbers. What she was wrong about was the idea that the numbers were the point. I remember staring at her and thinking, somewhere underneath all of this, I must have missed something enormous. Because the woman sitting across from me didn't look like someone going through a crisis alongside her husband. She looked like someone canceling a subscription service that had stopped being worth the price. Then she said the sentence I will never fully put down. "I'm not going to waste my youth watching someone disappear slowly." I heard a floorboard creak above us. I looked toward the hallway. Mia was standing halfway down the stairs in sweatpants, and one of my old Detroit Lions hoodies, her face the color of dry concrete. She looked younger than 16 in that moment. She looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms and ask me to tell her the names of every kind of cloud. Sandra didn't lower her voice. "Mia," said Mom quietly, like she was testing whether the word still meant the same thing it had an hour ago. Sandra stood up. "And I'm supposed to sacrifice my entire future because of it," she said. The kitchen went dead. Mia stared at her mother like she was looking at a stranger wearing a familiar face. I've told this story a few times now, and every time I get to this part, somebody asks me what I said next. The answer is nothing. I reached for my phone. My hands were shaking in a way I didn't want Sandra to see. I opened the banking app. Our joint checking account, which had carried close to $88,000 3 days earlier, showed a balance of just over $3,000. I scrolled through the transfers one by one. Each one had a date, a dollar amount, and a destination. The last one had a memo line. It said, "This should be enough for a few treatments." That hit differently than anything else that night. Not because of the amount, because 22 years of marriage had apparently ended with my wife leaving me grocery money and a note. 3 days later, Sandra moved into a condo near downtown Detroit with a man named Marcus Webb. I met him once when he pulled his white SUV into my driveway while I was putting trash cans to the curb. Tall guy, expensive watch, the kind of teeth that suggest regular whitening appointments. He stepped out in leather loafers without socks, even though it was 34 degrees outside, and offered me a handshake like we were old acquaintances at a networking event. He said, "No hard feelings, man. You've got to protect your energy in this life." I was 11 days away from my first chemotherapy infusion. I picked up the trash can and wheeled it toward the garage without answering him. Chemo started February 14th. I remember the date because the infusion center had a small paper heart taped to the door, and I found that funny in a way I couldn't explain to anyone. The first session lasted nearly 6 hours. You notice strange things sitting in oncology waiting rooms. The specific warmth of blankets that have just come out of a hospital dryer. The way the room gets quieter around noon. Across from me that first day, an older man, maybe mid-70s, sat reading a crossword puzzle, while his wife rubbed lotion into his knuckles without him asking. They didn't say much. They'd probably been married long enough that quiet together felt like its own language. I kept pretending to look at my phone because I couldn't handle sitting there alone. Mia waited in the parking structure the entire 6 hours because she was too young for the infusion room. When I finally came out nauseated, exhausted, feeling like my body had been wrung out and left on a radiator, she was leaning against the car holding 2 cups of coffee. "One's regular," she said carefully. "The other one's just hot water. I read that too much caffeine during chemo can be hard on your system." I almost couldn't finish the walk to the car. The months after that blurred together in the way that hard time always does, not fast, not slow, just relentless. Pills and insurance calls and vomiting at 2 in the morning and still trying to keep my business running between infusions because nobody was going to keep the lights on otherwise. I left laundry in the washer so long it grew mildew. I burned food because chemo brain made me forget I was cooking halfway through. One afternoon I tried making canned soup for Mia and almost got sick from the smell of it. I still made her do homework at the kitchen table while I sat there sweating through my shirt because I didn't know how else to pretend things were normal. The hardest single day came in July, when I sold my base boat. Nothing fancy, an older Ranger I'd bought when Mia was about 10, kept in the garage, used maybe 6 or 7 times a year. I sold it to cover tuition at her private prep school, after Sandra decided that expense was no longer her responsibility. The buyer came on a Tuesday morning and hooked it up to his truck while I stood in the driveway with my hands in my pockets. When he pulled out, I went back into the garage and sat down on the floor next to the empty space where the boat used to be and cried hard enough that my ribs hurt. Not because of the boat, because I finally understood my old life was gone completely. That night, I fell asleep on the couch with the television on low. I woke up just enough to feel someone pulling a blanket over my shoulders. "Dad," Mia said softly. "I'm sorry," I murmured, "for all of this." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm not going anywhere." I believe I slept through the entire night for the first time in weeks after that. If you've ever been in a room where someone you were supposed to be able to count on looked at you like you'd become an inconvenience, and I think more people have been in that room than ever admit it, then you understand something about those years that I don't have words precise enough to describe. It isn't grief exactly. It isn't even anger, after a while. It becomes something heavier and quieter, like wet concrete that never fully sets. You carry it in your chest, and eventually, you just learn to walk with the weight. I carried it for 3.5 years. Cancer treatment ended in late 2019. Remission is a word that sounds like a door opening, but what nobody tells you is that the room on the other side is still a mess. My hands had nerve damage from the chemo. I got tired climbing stairs. Every follow-up scan turned me into a wreck for 3 days beforehand, and financially, I was holding on by my fingernails. My business survived mostly because Michigan summers don't care about your medical history. When someone's central air goes out in July in the Detroit metro area, they call whoever answers the phone. There were days I crawled through tight spaces in attics, feeling like I might pass out from the heat. One afternoon in Livonia, I had to sit on a customer's front steps for 15 minutes because my legs started shaking while I was replacing a condenser unit. The homeowner came out and handed me a bottle of water without being asked. "You doing okay out there?" "Yeah," I said. "Just old." We both laughed. I sat there for another 5 minutes wondering if 49 actually counted as old now. Mia developed a ritual for scan days. Every time I had a follow-up at Beaumont, she showed up with coffee and something sweet, usually cinnamon rolls from a little bakery on Michigan Avenue in Dearborn. "Doctors can't give bad news while people are eating pastries," she told me once, very seriously. That became our superstition. We never broke it. One February morning, after a clear scan, she raised her paper cup in the parking structure and said, "Congratulations, you're still annoyingly alive." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled coffee on my coat. There were ugly moments, too. Steroids during treatment messed with my temper in ways I'm not proud of. One evening, Mia came home an hour late from a debate practice and forgot to text me, and I said things louder than I should have. She froze in the doorway with her backpack still on. I saw it immediately, that particular look kids get when they realize their parent is starting to unravel. "My phone died," she said quietly, and I sat down at the kitchen table and put my face in my hands and told her I was sorry. She walked over and hugged me anyway, which somehow made it worse. I sat there for a long time after she went to bed, feeling like the worst version of myself had started leaking out around the edges. Marcus, meanwhile, continued to exist in our lives the way a bad smell continues to exist in a room, faint, persistent, and always a little worse than you remembered. That man treated every conversation like a motivational podcast nobody asked to listen to. Poor people think emotionally. Millionaires own their mornings. Energy is the only currency that matters. He posted videos online standing next to luxury cars that, based on the comments, people suspected he was renting. My personal favorite comment, and Mia showed me this at breakfast, so I read it while eating oatmeal, said, "Brother, that's an Enterprise rental Maserati and we all know it." Even Mia laughed at that one. But Marcus crossed a line the spring of Mia's senior year. She posted graduation photos on social media, simple pictures. Nice dress, trees in the background. Tasteful. Marcus commented publicly, "Looking good, kiddo." Mia showed me the comment at the kitchen table the next morning. I actually stopped chewing. "That man is bizarre," I said. Mia looked physically disgusted. Sandra defended him, of course. Said that's just how Marcus jokes around. And I sat there thinking about what kind of 47-year-old man comments on his girlfriend's teenage daughter's photos and thinks that's normal, and I didn't have an answer that made any sense. By then, Mia had reduced contact with her mother to the minimum she felt was honest. She still tried harder than Sandra deserved, honestly. That's the thing about kids during divorce that most adults don't understand. They want to love both parents. They'll fold themselves into shapes that hurt just to keep the peace. Mia did that for years. She answered calls she didn't want to answer. She texted back within an hour, even when Sandra didn't. She kept the door open long past the point where most people would have closed it. Then the letter from the University of Michigan arrived. Engineering program, Ann Arbor campus. Full consideration for merit scholarships. I found the envelope in the mailbox on a rainy Thursday afternoon in March, between a grocery circular and an electric bill. Mia opened it standing at the kitchen counter while a frozen pizza cooked in the oven. When she started crying, I already knew. "Oh my God," she kept saying. "Oh my God." I hugged her hard enough that she made a sound. That night, after she went upstairs, I sat alone in the garage holding the acceptance letter in both hands like it might dissolve if I put it down. Because there were months during chemo when I wasn't certain I would live long enough to see her graduate high school. I sat there in that garage and understood for the first time in years that we had actually made it. A few days later, Sandra called. Video call. First one in over a year. She looked different, some work around the eyes, lips a bit fuller than I remembered. Marcus wandered through the background holding a protein shake like he was auditioning for a supplement commercial. Sandra told Mia how proud she was. Then she said she'd been thinking it was time to be a real family again. That she could help with tuition, housing, whatever Mia needed. Trevor leaned into the frame and said they should celebrate big, that successful people deserve rewards. After the call ended, Mia sat at the kitchen table for a long time, spinning her phone slowly in circles. Finally, she looked at me and asked, "Do you think money fixes what people break?" I wanted to say yes. Life would have been considerably simpler if it did. Instead, I told her the truth. "No," I said. "It just makes people feel less guilty sometimes." She nodded. Then she opened her calculus book and went back to work like the conversation had been about something ordinary. But something had shifted. I could feel it under everything. Graduation was 2 months away, and for the first time in years, Sandra wanted a front row seat. Graduation morning, I was standing in a strip mall parking lot in Dearborn at 5:45 a.m., balancing a travel iron on the center console of my Ford Escape, trying to unwrinkle a dress shirt by ironing it against the door frame. That is not an exaggeration. I had hung the shirt carefully the night before. By the time I got downtown, it looked like I'd slept in it. So there I was in a parking lot beside a dollar store, eating a gas station muffin, ironing my shirt while a semi idled 20 yards away. I caught my face in the rearview mirror afterward, and held my own gaze for a moment. The suit hung loose. Cancer had taken nearly 25 pounds. I never fully recovered. My face looked sharper now, older around the eyes. But I was there. I had made it to this morning. That counted for something. Ford Field Arena was packed by 6:30. Parents with bouquets, grandparents in their best shoes, teenagers in graduation caps taking photos while pretending not to care about any of it. Michigan humidity had already started collecting against the glass by the time I got inside. I found a seat in Section C with a clear line to the stage and set down 2 coffees and a paper bag from a bakery on Michigan Avenue cinnamon rolls, because we never broke the superstition. Mia spotted me from across the floor and smiled immediately. There's a specific way your child looks at you when they're wearing a graduation gown, and you can see the little kid they used to be underneath all of it, and I don't have the vocabulary for what that does to a person. You're embarrassingly early, she said. I wanted good seats. She took the coffee from me and shook her head like I was a minor problem she'd learned to tolerate. Her graduation stole was dark blue. She wore small, silver earrings. Simple, no drama. For about 20 minutes, everything felt normal. Then Sandra arrived. You could smell Marcus's cologne before you saw him. I don't know how to describe it other than aggressive. Something sharp and expensive deployed in an amount that suggested either no mirrors in his house or a complete disregard for other people's airways. Sandra came through the entrance in white, wide-legged trousers and oversized sunglasses even though we were indoors, which I found remarkable. Marcus walked beside her with his phone out, already filming, carrying a gift bag with a large red bow. Big day, he announced to no one in particular. Several parents turned around. Mia's shoulders tightened beside me. I watched it happen. Sandra swept over and pulled Mia into a long hug, the kind that's calibrated for an audience. Mia hugged her back politely, stiffly, with her arms doing the motion but her body not quite committing. Marcus aimed his phone at them. My stepdaughter's graduating today, he told the live stream. Mia flinched. I saw it. Sandra looked at me. Something passed across her face, maybe guilt, maybe just the discomfort of the situation, and then it disappeared. David, she said with a tight smile, you look healthy. Not good, not happy, healthy. Like I was a rescue animal that had stabilized. Morning, Sandra. Marcus put out his hand. I looked at it. He recovered smoothly. You've got to protect your energy, man, he said. Life is short. I stared at him. He didn't realize what he'd said. Mia nearly choked on her coffee. That bought me approximately 90 seconds of quiet enjoyment before Marcus started filming everything in the arena, parents, programs, decorations, while narrating to his live stream about success, leaving clues, and how proximity to excellence changes your trajectory. What does that mean at a high school graduation? I genuinely don't know. I don't think he did either. Sandra, meanwhile, delivered a series of compliments that each had a small blade inside them. Emma always got my ambition. She said she called Mia Emma twice, which is not Mia's name, and is not her middle name, and in fact has never been her name. And we always knew she was meant for bigger things. Purdue's expensive, but thank goodness some of us were planning ahead. She said Purdue. Mia got into Michigan. I let it go. Then Marcus announced he had a surprise. He walked us outside to the parking lot, where a bright red Corvette Stingray sat with a white ribbon across the hood. A few teenagers stopped walking to film it. Marcus spun the key fob on one finger like he was in a commercial. Only the best for our girl, he said, loudly enough that strangers turned around. Sandra smiled at the small crowd forming. You deserve a future bigger than struggle, sweetheart. Mia didn't move, didn't smile. I was suddenly very aware of my Escape parked 3 rows over with a rust patch near the rear wheel well, and one hubcap that didn't quite match the others. 0 to 60 in under 3, Marcus was saying. This thing is an absolute beast. Mia finally spoke. That seems like a lot. Marcus laughed loud. That's scarcity thinking, he said. That's how people stay small. Sandra smiled carefully at him. I caught the irritation in her eyes, because even she knew how that sounded, and then turned back toward Mia. Your father's always been the practical one. There was something underneath that sentence. I looked away. Honestly, part of me wanted Mia to take the car. I know how that sounds. But Mia was going to Ann Arbor in the fall. My business was still rebuilding. Financial help from people who hurt you is still financial help, and no amount of pride changes the cost of a textbook. I stood there trying to swallow all of that when Sandra leaned close to Mia and said, quietly, but not quietly enough, you don't want your whole life looking like your father's. He's a good man, sweetheart, but he never had any real vision. She looked at my suit when she said it. I felt my stomach drop. Not because the words hurt me exactly, I had built up enough scar tissue by then to absorb something like that. What dropped my stomach was that she said it to our daughter, in front of me. In the middle of Mia's graduation morning, I watched Mia's face change. Not tears, not hurt, anger. The cold, quiet kind that arrives without theater. Marcus dangled the Corvette keys toward her with a grin. Go ahead, take a look inside. Mia reached out slowly and took the keys. She looked at me for a long moment, and I felt my chest tighten, because I have been Mia's father for 18 years, and I know that expression. I saw at the time a boy in middle school shoved a smaller kid in the lunch line, and Mia walked over without raising her voice, and said something to him that made him apologize twice. My daughter doesn't explode. When she finally reaches her limit, she just gets very still and very clear. The graduation ceremony itself passed in a blur I can barely reconstruct. I remember applause and names and the sound of folding chairs and Mia crossing the stage around noon with her honor cords and her engineering stole and the biggest smile I had seen on her face in years. I stood so fast clapping that my knee almost locked up. Sandra screamed louder than anyone around her. Marcus filmed it vertically and yelled, "That's my girl." A woman next to me winced. After the ceremony, families poured outside into the June heat. Balloons and bouquets and grandparents crying and fathers not crying even though they were absolutely crying. Michigan in June smells like hot pavement and mowed grass and someone's barbecue 3 blocks away. Marcus practically sprinted to the Corvette. He positioned Mia beside it while Sandra fixed her own sunglasses for photos. A small crowd gathered because of course they did. It's a red Corvette with a bow on it. People are predictably curious. I stayed near the curb holding Mia's flowers. I watched her take the keys from her gown pocket. I held my breath. Trevor lifted his phone. Hard work pays off, he told his live stream. Mia cleared her throat. Can I say something first? Marcus grinned. Absolutely. She turned away from the car and faced the people who had gathered around it. Her hand was shaking slightly. When she began, her voice was quiet, almost too quiet. Thank you for the gift, she said carefully. Sandra exhaled with relief. Then Mia said, but I can't accept it. The mood shifted so completely you could feel it physically. Trevor blinked twice. Sandra made a small sound like a word that didn't finish. Mia looked down at the keys for a second. Please let me finish, she said. Everyone went silent. My dad has been driving me around in that old Ford Escape over there for 4 years, she said, and she actually pointed toward my car in the parking lot. People turned to look at it. It looked exactly like what it was. Faded paint, small dent near the passenger door, one mismatched hubcap catching the sunlight. My face got hot. I looked down at the flowers I was holding. 3 summers without working air conditioning, she continued, because it cost too much to fix at the time. She looked directly at her mother. You left when he started chemo. A few nearby conversations stopped completely. He was sick every night, she said. He was exhausted every day. He missed meals and sleep and things he needed. Her voice cracked slightly on the next sentence. He never missed one thing for me. Sandra's jaw tightened. Emma, this is not the place. Mia continued as if she hadn't spoken. Every scan day, every school thing, every debate tournament, every time I needed somebody to show up, he showed up. She paused. You sent gift cards. Sandra stepped closer. You're embarrassing yourself. I was embarrassed a long time ago. Dead silence. The kind that has weight. Mia held the Corvette keys up between 2 fingers. This car is beautiful, she said. Her voice was steady now, completely calm. But it can't buy back 4 years. Sandra's face flushed dark red. Emma, Stop. You miss birthdays, Mia said. Panic attacks, scan days, Christmases. She looked at me, and I looked immediately away because I knew if our eyes met for more than a second I was going to embarrass both of us. He sold his boat so I could stay in school. I had not known she knew about the boat. I stood there looking at the concrete. Marcus stepped forward with his hands out, trying to diffuse, laughing in that forced social way. Hey kid, come on, it's just a car. Mia turned to him. Exactly. A beat. Which makes it really strange that you thought it could replace being a parent. Two people standing nearby said something under their breath. I heard one of them say it loud enough that it was clearly not meant to be private. Marcus reached for the keys, his face going red now, the performance gone. All right, that's enough drama. And I need you to understand I could not have written this. Marcus fumbled. The keys slipped from his fingers, bounced once off the edge of the curb, and dropped straight into a storm drain. The sound was small. A single metallic clink. Everyone froze. Marcus stared at the drain. Then at his hand. Then back at the drain. Then he got on his knees in a $300 pair of trousers and started trying to push his arm through the grate. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard it hurt. Parents around us laughed. Not polite laughter, real laughter, the kind that spreads because it can't help itself. A teenage boy nearby whispered to his friend. Bro's entire live stream just watched him lose a Corvette. Marcus was sweating through his shirt, cursing quietly, unable to get his arm past the second knuckle. Sandra turned to me. This is your fault, she hissed. You put these ideas in her head. You poisoned her against me. And something settled inside me, not snapped, settled. The way a room goes quiet after a long noise finally stops. I looked at Sandra directly. I spent years protecting her from the truth, I said. I just stopped. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Mia appeared beside me and took my hand. Let's go home, Dad. We walked. Behind us, Marcus was still on his knees beside a storm drain, live streaming accidentally, while strangers recorded him on their phones. Sandra called after us once. Neither of us turned around. We walked across that parking lot together in the June heat toward my old Ford Escape with the rust spots and the mismatched hubcap and the broken air conditioning. And I did not feel 1 ounce of shame about any of it. What this story taught me, and I had years to figure this out, is that illness is a kind of clarity test. It doesn't change people. It reveals them. The people who love you comfortably, who love the version of you that is easy and uncomplicated and convenient, those people are everywhere. The people who stay when life becomes genuinely hard, when there is nothing romantic or comfortable about loving you, those people are rare. And if you have even one of them, you are not a man who lost everything. You are a man who found out exactly who he had. The mistake people make is waiting until a crisis to figure out who those people are. You don't need cancer to pay attention. You just need to notice who shows up when you stop performing okay and start actually struggling. Notice who stays in the room. Notice who asks the real question instead of the polite one. Here's the question I want to leave you with. Is there someone in your life right now who stayed with you when it cost them something? Have you told them what that meant? Don't wait. That's the one lesson I'd give back every hard year to be able to tell myself sooner. 3 days after graduation, I was standing in my kitchen at 6 a.m. eating dry cereal while Mia argued with our printer about university housing paperwork. That was closure, apparently. Cereal and printer errors? I preferred it to anything dramatic. A few weeks into August, I dropped the Escape at a repair shop near Greenfield Road on a Saturday morning. The mechanic looked up from his paperwork, confused. He turned the computer screen toward me. Your deposit is already on file, he said. Paid in full. There's a customer note. Make sure the AC works perfectly. He won't spend money on himself. I stood there for a moment. The mechanic smiled. Your daughter? I nodded once, because my throat had made a unilateral decision to stop working. That afternoon I picked up the Escape. Cold air hit my face the second I started the engine. I sat in that parking lot for longer than was reasonable, both hands on the wheel, letting the air conditioning run. Then I flipped the sun visor down. A folded note dropped into my lap. Dad, you spent years shielding me from things I didn't even know were coming. Let me take care of you for once. Love, Mia. I cried in that parking lot, next to a dollar store and a vape shop, in a 10-year-old SUV with a mismatched hubcap, ugly crying for a solid 5 minutes. I'm not embarrassed about that either. Cancer took a lot from me. My strength for a while, my marriage permanently, the version of the future I thought I was building. But sitting there with cold air finally working again and a note in my lap from my daughter, I understood clearly what had survived. If you're still watching, drop a 1 in the comments if you think Mia did the right thing at graduation. Drop a 2 if you think she went too far. Drop a 3 if you've been through something that showed you exactly who your real people are. I want to hear from you. Tell me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is there. Every time I read those comments, I'm reminded of how many people are sitting somewhere carrying something heavy and still showing up for the people they love anyway. That matters. And if this story found you on a hard day, if any part of this felt familiar, I hope you'll subscribe and stay. I'm going to keep telling stories like this one for as long as you keep showing up to hear them. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in the Detroit metropolitan area to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental.